In the heart of Baltimore, a city already burdened with headlines of violence, injustice, and broken trust, one night outside a crowded bar would ignite a storm the world couldn't ignore. It wasn't a crime planned in the shadows. It was captured under the neon lights, in full view of a dozen cell phones, a young man gasping for breath, a bouncer's arm locked around his neck, and a crowd torn between shock and fear. But this wasn't just another case of bar violence. This was a story that would question the very meaning of justice, the weight of human life, and how quickly control can turn into cruelty. What happened that night wasn't supposed to happen at all, and yet, by sunrise, one man was dead, and an entire city demanded answers. So stay with me till the end, because what looks like self-defense at first glance will soon reveal a darkness no camera could hide. This is the Baltimore Bouncer chokehold case, and trust me, the truth behind those few fatal minutes will haunt you long after this video ends. It was a regular Friday night at the Haven Lounge, one of Baltimore's most popular downtown clubs, a place where laughter, music, and cheap drinks melted the week's stress away. The lights flickered purple and blue as bass echoed through the walls, and the line outside stretched down the block. Among the faces in that crowd was Jordan Matthews, a 26-year-old graphic designer with a calm smile and a reputation for never getting into trouble. He wasn't there to fight. He was there to celebrate. But every celebration has a turning point. As the clock hit 1:32 a.m., the crowd began to shift. The air thickened. Witnesses later recalled how Jordan seemed uneasy, almost like he felt something coming. One drink spilled, a few words exchanged, and the tension snapped like a live wire. No one knew exactly who shoved first, but within seconds 2 men were in a shouting match near the club's exit, and the music stopped mid-beat. The DJ froze. The crowd turned. Security stepped in. That's when Derek Simmons, a 34-year-old bouncer built like a tank, pushed his way through. Derek had worked security for years, his face unreadable, his body language pure authority. He'd seen it all before: drunks, loudmouths, street fights. But tonight, something in his eyes looked different. Witnesses said he looked angry even before he reached them. Maybe it was stress, maybe it was pride, or maybe it was something much darker waiting to erupt. As Jordan raised his hands to show he didn't want trouble, Derek grabbed him by the arm. Jordan tried to speak, to explain that he wasn't the one causing the problem, but the bouncer's grip tightened. Phones began to rise from the crowd, flashes of light cutting through the darkness. Someone yelled, "Hey man, chill! He's not fighting!" But the warning went unheard. The night that began with laughter was about to end in horror. The crowd watched, helpless, as Derek shoved Jordan outside the door. The cold Baltimore air hit hard. Jordan's voice could be heard pleading, "I'm not resisting." Yet in a matter of seconds, Derek's arm wrapped around his neck, a textbook chokehold, the kind banned in most police departments. Jordan's feet lifted off the ground. His hands clawed at the air. The cameras kept rolling. The only sound was gasping, and then silence. In that frozen moment, as the crowd screamed and the neon lights reflected off the sidewalk, no one realized they were witnessing the last seconds of a man's life. And no one, not even Derek, seemed to understand how irreversible those next few breaths would be. The street outside the Haven Lounge was alive just moments ago. Music, laughter, the shuffle of sneakers on pavement. But now, it stood frozen, every eye locked on the horrifying sight unfolding under the dim yellow street lights. Derek's massive arm was clamped around Jordan's neck, muscles bulging, veins visible, as if fueled by something far beyond adrenaline. The sound of Jordan's choking breath echoed in the crowd's silence, sharp, desperate, and human. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to hold still. People had their phones out, recording from every angle, their hands trembling. A woman's voice cracked through the air. "Let him go, you're killing him," someone else shouted for the police. But others, scared of getting involved, stood motionless, trapped between fear and disbelief. A few tried to step closer, but Derek's glare stopped them cold. His face was expressionless, unreadable, as if his humanity had been switched off for those few fatal moments. The crowd became both witness and prisoner to the horror they could not stop. Jordan's body began to weaken. His hands, once fighting for breath, now fell limp at his sides. His head tilted slightly, lips parting, eyes rolling back. The people closest to him realized this wasn't just a scuffle anymore. This was something else. Someone screamed for Derek to stop, but it was too late. Even as Jordan's voice faded to silence, Derek held on, tighter, longer than anyone could understand. That grip was no longer about control. It was about dominance. It was about something buried deep inside him, finally breaking free. One man, holding his phone high, whispered, "He's not moving." Another voice, trembling, said, "Call 911 now." The chaos that followed felt unreal. Strangers shouting, phones ringing, feet stumbling. Yet, amid that panic, Derek finally loosened his hold. Jordan's body dropped like a rag doll, hitting the concrete with a sound that silenced the entire street. His chest didn't move. His eyes stared blankly toward the city skyline, the same skyline he'd admired earlier that night. The crowd stood in stunned paralysis, realizing they had just watched a life end in real time. Derek stepped back, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling like he'd just run a marathon. His eyes darted from Jordan's still body to the group of people filming. He muttered something under his breath. No one could make out the words. A few bystanders thought they saw his hands shaking. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was fear, but it was already too late to take anything back. The sound of sirens began, to grow in the distance, faint but closing in fast like a countdown to judgment. As those flashing red and blue lights painted the pavement, a strange guilt settled over everyone watching. They had recorded, they had shouted, but they hadn't stopped it. Deep down, they all knew this night would replay in their minds forever. The night when a city's nightlife turned into a public execution. And as the police arrived, the question whispered through every shaking lip, why didn't anyone step in sooner? The flashing blue and red lights washed over the dark street, painting the concrete in chaos. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt outside the Haven Lounge. Officers spilled out, their boots heavy, hands hovering near their belts, expecting a drunken brawl, not a silent crowd surrounding a motionless body. The music inside the bar had stopped completely now. The city's heartbeat had slowed. As one officer shouted for everyone to step back, his flashlight landed on Jordan's face. Pale, lifeless, still. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. "We've got a man down." People began talking all at once, voices overlapping in panic. "He choked him. He didn't stop. We told him to let go." A woman sobbed uncontrollably near the curb, her phone still recording even as her hands trembled. The officers pushed through, kneeling beside Jordan. They checked for a pulse, once, twice, nothing. One officer started CPR while another called for paramedics, his voice cracking under pressure. And standing only a few feet away, Derek, the bouncer, stood motionless, his black security shirt clinging to his skin with sweat. He looked both lost and unbothered at the same time. When the police turned to him, he didn't resist. He raised his hands slightly, almost rehearsed, and said, "He attacked me first." The officer's jaw tightened. The cameras from bystanders zoomed in, catching every word. One officer asked, "Did you use a chokehold?" Derek's reply was flat, "I just restrained him." But the crowd exploded in outrage. "Restrained him? He's dead!" Someone shouted. The tension between the crowd and the officers grew dangerously thick. For a brief moment, the police weren't sure whether they were controlling a crime scene or standing in the middle of a riot waiting to happen. A paramedic team arrived, sirens still echoing through the night. They lifted Jordan's body onto a stretcher, their faces grim, their movements fast but hopeless. They knew from experience what a lifeless body looked like. Still they worked, pumping air, pressing his chest, refusing to give up in front of those cameras. Derek watched silently, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting between Jordan and the police. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. For the first time that night, the unbreakable bouncer looked human, afraid. Meanwhile, one officer began questioning witnesses. The crowd was chaotic, emotional, and angry. Each person had seen something slightly different, but their stories shared one chilling truth. Derek had held the choke far too long. He stopped moving and he still didn't let go, one man said, his voice shaking. He wanted to prove a point. Those words hit like a bullet. A few officers exchanged grim looks, already sensing this wasn't going to be just another bar incident. This was about to become a national headline. As the ambulance doors closed and drove away into the distance, leaving only tire marks and a bloodstain on the pavement, the crowd began to disperse. But the silence that followed was unbearable. The cold wind brushed past the yellow police tape, carrying with it whispers of guilt, fear, and disbelief. Someone murmured, "He was just here an hour ago," smiling. And in that single sentence lay the haunting reminder: life can vanish in the time it takes to blink. By morning, the city of Baltimore had woken up to a storm. Videos from the night before were already viral, flashing across every phone, every screen, every timeline. Headlines screamed words like "Unarmed Man Dies Outside Club" and "Caught on Camera, Fatal Chokehold." The footage was raw and undeniable. You could see Jordan gasping for air, hear the crowd screaming, watch Derek's arm locked around his throat. No filters, no editing, just brutal, unfiltered reality. It was the kind of evidence that couldn't be ignored, not even by the toughest defense. Down at the precinct, Derek sat in an interrogation room under harsh fluorescent lights, his once confident posture replaced by quiet stillness. A police officer slid a bottle of water toward him, but he didn't touch it. Across from him sat Detective Carla Reese, known for her sharp instincts and colder tone. "Tell me what happened," she said calmly, her eyes fixed on his face. Derek leaned back, exhaled, and said the same line he'd been repeating all night. "I was doing my job. He came at me first. I restrained him. He stopped breathing, and I let go." His voice carried no remorse, just exhaustion. But Reese wasn't convinced. She pushed a tablet across the table showing the viral video, the same one the entire city had seen by now. "This doesn't look like restraint," she said quietly. "It looks like anger." Derek didn't reply. His eyes flickered toward the screen where Jordan's body went limp in slow motion. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. A flicker of realization, maybe even regret. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You weren't supposed to record that close," he muttered under his breath. Reese leaned forward. "The problem isn't that they recorded it. The problem is what they recorded." Outside that room, reporters filled the building's lobby, cameras flashing, microphones raised. The community wanted justice, immediately. Protesters were already gathering at the club's front steps, holding signs that read, "Justice for Jordan," and "Stop the chokeholds." His family had spoken out too, his mother's trembling voice breaking hearts across the nation. He was a gentle soul. "He said he'd be home by 2 a.m. He never came home." Her words echoed on every news channel, turning public sympathy into outrage. Later that day, the police chief faced the media. The statement he gave would change everything. Standing behind the podium, voice steady but uneasy, he said, "Based on preliminary evidence, we have reason to believe the bouncer used excessive and unauthorized force. We are cooperating with investigators to ensure accountability." That single sentence, unauthorized force, hit like lightning. The crowd erupted. The internet caught fire. Derek Simmons was no longer seen as a man doing his job. He was seen as a murderer. And yet, deep inside that police station, Detective Reese couldn't shake one thought. Something about Derek's eyes. Something in the way he repeated, "He came at me first." It wasn't just defense. It was fear. But fear of what? Of being caught? Or of something? Or someone else entirely? The truth was about to take a darker turn, one that would leave everyone questioning not just what happened that night, but why. 2 days after the incident, Baltimore was no longer the same. The club remained closed, surrounded by yellow tape and wilted flowers left by strangers who'd never even met Jordan but felt his loss as if he were family. The city felt heavy, a silence in the air that even traffic couldn't drown. But inside a dimly lit room at the precinct, Detective Carla Reese stared at a computer screen that held something no one else had seen yet. The club's security footage, obtained directly from the owner that morning. What she was about to discover would shake the foundation of everything the world thought it knew about that night. The footage began hours before the tragedy, showing people laughing, drinking, dancing. Jordan appeared multiple times, smiling, waving to friends, checking his phone. He looked like every other person there, alive, carefree, completely unaware of the fate waiting outside. But then around 1:25 a.m., something caught Reese's eye. Jordan walked past Derek near the bar. Derek's head turned sharply, watching him in a way that didn't seem casual. Reese replayed it again and again. There was something in that glance, something personal, a flash of recognition or resentment. At 1:31 a.m., a man, tall, wearing a dark hoodie, brushed past Jordan, spilling his drink. Jordan laughed it off, even raised his hands as if to apologize. The man in the hoodie leaned in, said something in his ear, and walked away. A moment later, Derek approached, visibly agitated, speaking with the same hooded man near the entrance. No audio, but the tension was unmistakable. Within seconds, Derek stormed toward Jordan, and what happened next was already viral history. Reese paused the video, her gut tightening. Something was wrong. The hooded man's face was never clear, but he seemed to whisper something to Derek before stepping back into the shadows. Reese enhanced the frame, zooming in. The hooded man had a tattoo, faint but visible, a small black serpent on his wrist. She knew that mark. It belonged to a local underground security ring that had been under investigation for months, a group notorious for taking private cash enforcement jobs around Baltimore's nightlife scene. They weren't just bouncers. They were hired muscle, men who handled trouble for money. Suddenly, Derek's fear made sense. Maybe he wasn't acting alone. Maybe he'd been pushed into this, or worse, paid to do it. When Reese called her captain with the discovery, the reaction was immediate. "Keep it quiet," he said sharply. "We don't go public until we're sure." But the truth had already started leaking online. Someone, possibly from inside the club, posted a short clip showing Derek talking to the hooded man moments before the fight. The caption read, "There was someone else involved." The internet exploded. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. Was Jordan targeted? Was it personal? Or was it a setup that spiraled out of control? By midnight, the hashtag #TheOtherMan trended across the country. People demanded answers, the media demanded names, and the police, now under immense pressure, had no choice but to dig deeper. What began as a single act of violence was unraveling into something far more sinister. Somewhere in Baltimore's underbelly, a secret connection was waiting to be exposed. And it all began with one blurry frame and a serpent tattoo. The next morning, Detective Carla Reese sat alone in her office, watching the footage again and again. Each time, her unease deepened. Derek's chokehold wasn't just excessive, it was deliberate, precise, almost trained. It wasn't something a nightclub bouncer randomly decided to do in the heat of the moment. It was controlled, rehearsed. Reese knew that move. It was the same maneuver used by certain private security enforcers who operated outside the law. The kind who didn't just remove troublemakers, they sent messages. The question was, to whom was Derek sending this message, and why did Jordan have to pay the price? Digging deeper into Derek's background revealed a trail no one expected. Before becoming a bouncer, he'd worked for a private security firm called Iron Core Protection, a company linked to multiple excessive force complaints. 3 cases had been dismissed quietly, all involving men who had suffered severe injuries during routine removals. But Jordan's case was different. He didn't survive. Reese found records showing Derek had been fired from Iron Core 2 years ago after a violent altercation. Yet the owner of the Haven Lounge had personally rehired him only months before the incident. Why? That was the thread that refused to unravel easily. Later that afternoon, Reese interviewed the club's owner, Marvin Clark, a slick man with a practiced smile and a lawyer sitting beside him. "Derek was one of my best," he said calmly, avoiding eye contact. He kept things under control. But when Reese asked about the hooded man, Marvin froze for half a second, just enough for her to notice. His lawyer quickly intervened, calling the question irrelevant. The tension in the room was palpable. Reese leaned forward and asked quietly, "Was Derek told to target Jordan Matthews?" The owner didn't answer. Instead, he whispered something to his lawyer, stood up, and ended the interview. That silence spoke louder than any confession. Back at the precinct, Derek finally requested to speak again. This time he looked exhausted, hollow, and shaken. "I didn't mean to kill him," he said softly, staring at the floor. "You don't understand. I was told to keep an eye on him." Reese's pulse quickened. "By who?" she pressed. Derek hesitated, then whispered a name, one that made her heart drop. Marvin. He claimed the club owner told him that Jordan was involved in something that could ruin people, and that if he caused trouble, Derek had to make sure he never came back. It was supposed to be intimidation, not death. Reese sat back, realizing the chokehold wasn't a loss of control. It was an order carried out too far, but the truth never stays buried for long. Within hours, Derek's statement leaked. The media pounced on it, spinning wild theories, that Jordan was an informant, that the club was laundering money, that the chokehold was a cover-up gone wrong. Crowds flooded the streets again, demanding Marvin Clark's arrest. Yet, despite all the chaos, Marvin remained untouchable, protected by layers of influence, power, and silence. And somewhere in that silence, the serpent tattoo reappeared, seen again on the wrist of a man standing near Marvin in a leaked photograph. It was no coincidence. That night, Reese sat at her desk staring at the photo, the rain tapping softly against the window. She finally understood the chilling truth. Jordan wasn't just a victim of a violent bouncer. He had stumbled into something much bigger, something that reached far beyond one bar, one fight, or one man's mistake. The chokehold that took his life wasn't just an act of aggression. It was a message, one meant for anyone who tried to expose the secrets hiding in Baltimore's shadows. 3 days after Derek's confession, the Baltimore Police Department was on fire. Not literally, but politically, socially, and morally. The media storm had become uncontrollable, and whispers of corruption inside the city's club industry were spreading like smoke. Detective Reese hadn't slept properly in days. Her desk was buried under case files, printouts, and blurry screenshots from the viral footage. But everything changed the moment a small, anonymous email landed in her inbox with the subject line, "You're looking in the right direction. I used to work for him." Attached to the message was a short video, grainy, filmed in a dim basement. A man's face was half hidden by shadows, his voice digitally distorted. "My name doesn't matter," he began, "but I worked at the Haven before Derek. Marvin Clark isn't just a club owner. He moves money through that place and uses men like Derek to keep mouths shut." Reese froze, replaying the clip over and over. The man continued. Jordan wasn't some random customer. He knew something. He was recording that night, trying to catch Marvin's people dealing drugs inside. He wasn't drunk. He was scared. Reese's mind raced. If Jordan had been recording, then his phone might hold the real story, the one nobody had seen yet. But the police report mentioned that when paramedics arrived, Jordan's phone was missing. She checked the evidence inventory again. No phone, no data, nothing. Someone had taken it before the scene was cleared, and the only people with that kind of access were either police or club staff. The realization hit hard. The cover-up wasn't just on the outside, it was bleeding into the system itself. Desperate for answers, Reese met the whistleblower in person 2 nights later. He was a former bartender, nervous, paranoid, constantly checking over his shoulder. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he told her. "Those guys with the serpent tattoo, they're not security. They're part of something called the Black Line. They run illegal protection deals all across the East Coast. Marvin's just their local partner." Reese's hands clenched as he spoke. Every sentence unraveled a darker web, and suddenly Jordan's death didn't seem like an accident at all. It was a warning to anyone who got too close. Before leaving, the whistleblower slid a USB drive across the table. "He recorded something that night," he said quietly. "It was saved to the club system before they deleted it. I copied it before I left." Reese took the drive, her pulse thundering. Back at the precinct, she plugged it in. The screen flickered, then played the footage. Jordan's voice was shaky but clear. "If something happens to me, tell my mom I didn't start this. I just wanted to do what's right." The clip cut off abruptly. The same moment Derek appeared behind him. Reese sat frozen, realizing she was holding the last words of a man who knew he was about to die. Tears filled her eyes, but anger quickly followed. Jordan wasn't some drunk victim who picked the wrong fight. He was a whistleblower himself, silenced before he could speak. And now, Reese had proof that could destroy an entire underground network, if she survived long enough to reveal it. The walls around her felt thinner, the shadows in the hallway darker. Because in Baltimore, exposing the truth didn't just make you a hero, it made you a target. That night, Baltimore's streets were quiet again, but it was the kind of quiet that made your skin crawl. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving behind slick roads that reflected the city's neon glow like broken glass. Detective Reese sat in her apartment, the lights low, the USB drive still on her desk. Jordan's trembling voice from the recording echoed in her mind. If something happens to me. She hadn't told anyone about the drive yet, not even her captain. Experience had taught her one brutal truth. Sometimes the danger didn't come from the streets. It came from inside the department itself. At 12:07 a.m., her phone buzzed. An unknown number, no caller ID. She hesitated, then answered. A male voice, calm and composed, said just 3 words. "Stop digging, Carla." Then silence. The line disconnected. Her heartbeat pounded so loud it felt deafening. She rushed to her window. A black SUV sat parked across the street, engine running, lights off. A chill ran down her spine. She pulled the curtain back, stepped away, and dialed the station. But before anyone could answer, another text flashed on her screen. "We know what you found." Every instinct told her to run, to hide, but that wasn't who she was. She grabbed her gun, the USB, and her laptop, throwing everything into a bag. If they wanted to scare her, they'd have to try harder. But just as she reached the door, a soft knock echoed. Slow, deliberate, almost polite. 3 knocks, then silence. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. The peephole showed nothing but darkness. Seconds later, another text came through. "It's already too late." Her mind raced. She slipped quietly toward the back door, grabbing her coat and car keys. She'd dealt with killers, smugglers, liars. But this was different. This was organized, controlled. As she drove off into the empty streets, every shadow looked alive, every turn felt watched. She made her way toward a trusted contact, a journalist named Ethan Cole, who had once helped her expose a corrupt officer years ago. If anyone could protect the evidence and get it public, it was him. But time was running out fast. When she finally reached Ethan's apartment, he opened the door, eyes wide with shock. "Carla, you look like you've seen a ghost." She handed him the USB. "This is the real story," she whispered. He loaded it onto his computer, and his face turned pale as the footage played. "My God, they'll kill you for this," he said. "Then I'll die doing something that matters," she replied. But even as they spoke, headlights appeared outside the window. The same black SUV, the same silent watchers. They had followed her. Ethan quickly backed up the data, transferring it to a secure cloud server, his hands trembling. The tension in the room was suffocating. "If they get this, the truth dies with it," he said. Reese nodded. Outside, car doors opened. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. The threat wasn't coming, and it was already here. And before the night ended, someone was going to get hurt. The hallway outside Ethan's apartment was dead silent, the kind of silence that screams danger. Reese pressed her back against the wall, gun raised, her heartbeat echoing louder than the ticking clock above the door. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Whoever they weren't here to talk. Ethan whispered, "We need to move." He slipped the flash drive into his pocket and shut down the computer, leaving only the faint glow of the monitor behind. Then came the first sound of the lock turning. Reese's breath hitched. "Go out the fire exit," she mouthed, motioning toward the back. The two moved quickly, shadows against the dim apartment light. The door burst open just as they slipped out. 2 men in black rushed in, faces hidden, weapons drawn. Reese and Ethan sprinted down the narrow metal staircase, their footsteps clanging like alarm bells in the night. "They're following us!" Ethan shouted, glancing back. The SUV engines roared to life below, headlights cutting through the rain-slick alley. The pair darted through a maze of back streets, turning corners blindly, adrenaline pushing them past exhaustion. Reese's mind raced. These weren't random thugs. They were professionals, the same kind who operated under the black line, and now they wanted the evidence back. At one point, Reese slipped on the wet pavement, her gun clattering across the ground. Ethan pulled her up, breathless, muttering, "You can't stop now." They ducked into an abandoned parking structure, hiding behind a pillar as the black SUV crawled past the entrance. The hum of its engine reverberated through the concrete walls. Every second felt like a countdown. Reese could hear her pulse thudding in her ears. She looked at Ethan, his face pale but determined. "If we split up, they can't follow both of us," she whispered. He shook his head violently. "You'll never make it alone." But she knew she had no choice. "If they get me, they'll stop looking for you," she said quietly. "You need to get that footage to someone who can protect it. The press, the networks, anyone." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He handed her his phone, already connected to the secure upload. "It's backing up to 3 separate servers," he said. "If anything happens, it still goes live." Reese gave a faint, tired smile. "Good. Then at least someone will hear him." Jordan. Moments later, they split, Ethan heading toward the stairwell, Reese running through a side exit that opened into a dark alley. The rain had started again, steady and cold. Her shoes splashed through puddles as she moved quietly, keeping to the shadows. Behind her, the sound of a gunshot cracked the air, echoing off the concrete. She stopped dead in her tracks. Another shot, then silence. Her heart broke in that instant. Ethan, she didn't need to see it to know. They'd caught him, but if the upload had completed, his death wouldn't be in vain. The truth was out, or at least it soon would be. Reese kept moving, every step heavier than the last. The alley stretched endlessly ahead, her breath visible in the cold air. The headlights from the SUV swept across the walls, searching for her like predator eyes. She ducked behind a dumpster, clutching her gun close, whispering a prayer under her breath. Somewhere behind her, a voice shouted, "We've got her trail!" That was her cue. She bolted into the darkness, no longer running for her life, but for justice. The city that had swallowed Jordan's truth once before was about to choke on it. Reese burst into the narrow side street that led straight toward the harbor. Her breath came in sharp, painful bursts as she ran past the flickering streetlights, each one dying as if the city itself was closing its eyes. Behind her, the echo of boots and shouts grew closer, hunters chasing their prey. She clutched the flash drive in her hand like it was a heartbeat, the last pulse of a man who had been silenced. The truth weighed heavier than the gun at her hip. "Jordan, I'm not letting you vanish twice," she whispered, pushing herself faster into the night. As the first sirens began to wail, Reese reached the waterfront. The rain was coming down hard now, drenching her clothes and blurring her vision. A lone fisherman's shack stood at the edge of the pier, its light barely visible through the storm. She stumbled inside, slamming the door shut, and quickly connected her phone to the laptop Ethan had hidden in her backpack. The upload was still in progress, 83%, 84%, 85%. Her hands shook as she watched the numbers climb. Come on," she murmured. The gunshots outside drew closer. Each second was borrowed time. Suddenly, the door burst open. A man stepped in, one of the same who'd attacked Ethan. His face was masked, his voice calm but cold. "You think truth saves anyone?" he sneered. Reese raised her gun, but he was faster, knocking it away. They fought, raw, desperate, brutal. She slammed his head into the wall, grabbed the gun back, and fired once. The man dropped instantly. For a moment, there was silence again, until the laptop pinged. "Upload complete." Reese froze, her breath catching. It was done. The footage was online, spreading to every news outlet and social feed across the nation. On the screen, the world finally saw it, the unedited, uncut footage. Jordan gasping for air, the chokehold tightening, the desperate crowd screaming for help. The timestamps proved the bouncer's restraint had lasted nearly 7 minutes. The cops had lied. The bar had covered it up. The truth that had been buried under threats and money was now open, raw, and unstoppable. The next morning, the footage would shake Baltimore. The mayor would call an emergency press briefing, and the name Jordan Price would become a movement, not a memory. Reese sat on the wet floor, trembling, her body aching from the fight. Through the cracked window, she could see dawn breaking, soft orange light spilling across the harbor. It was over, but she didn't feel peace. Justice had come, but it had cost everything. Ethan was gone. Jordan was gone. She whispered softly, "You got your truth, Jordan. I just wish it didn't have to hurt this much." She stood, wiping her tears, and walked toward the rising sun, the city behind her now echoing with sirens, headlines and cries for change. And somewhere across the world, millions of people were watching that footage, some crying, some angry, but all awake. The chokehold that once silenced a man had now awakened a nation. The truth finally spoke, louder than any lie ever could. The Baltimore Bouncer chokehold case wasn't just another tragedy. It was a mirror, a reflection of how power bends truth, and how truth, once freed, can burn down everything built on lies. Jordan Price's story became more than a case file. It became a question that still haunts every viewer who dares to watch that footage. How many truths are still being strangled before our eyes? If this story gripped your heart, if it made you feel, then don't scroll away. Subscribe right now to Unseen Mystery, where every story digs deeper than headlines, where every voice silenced by fear is given sound again. Because sometimes, truth doesn't die. It just waits for someone brave enough to tell it. Until the next mystery. And remember, the truth you ignore today might be the mystery you watch tomorrow.